Welcome. It's another Thursday evening in quarantine land. It's time for another Thursday night, Real Monsters. I'm your host, S.K. Barrett. Joining me is the ever talented Wes Hobrick. Wel-
Hello, hello, hello.
Welcome. How you doing?
Oh, I'm not too bad. How are you?
Doing all right. Doing all right. Having fantastic weather the last couple of days.
Very good. Yeah, it's been storming like crazy here most every single day. Monsoon weather in Illinois.
Oof. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Um, This is unusually good weather for this time of year. Usually from Memorial Day till Independence Day is pretty crappy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is true. It was where you're at. I mean, maybe the stereotype's wrong about the Pacific Northwest,
it's
but,
not.
you know. Yep. Well, but
The joke is we have two seasons, winter, then July and August.
oh well. Yeah, it's I mean the stereotype with the Midwest really isn't wrong either. It's just always volatile here with the weather. So but yeah, speaking of that, with the news, actually right before we were going on,
Yeah?
the former Cardinal pitcher, St. Louis Cardinals pitcher Felipe Vasquez, who is sitting in prison right now for about 20 felonies related to a child sex case. They
Okay.
brought up another one against him, they
Oh,
said. Yeah,
so he's
but
already convicted of the others?
I'm pretty sure he might be sitting and waiting for that.
Okay.
But I would have to check it a bit more closely. But yeah, they're bringing another one against him. So, and it's just all too bad. But
I don't, I just don't get, it seems like there's every week there's news stories of child pornography and child sex rings and all this shit. And they cops. Where was it? They Canada shut down a big child sex trafficking ring that
mhm.
involved, school officials.
Yeah, I saw that. And
I,
it's
I,
great that they caught him, but
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, absolutely. I just don't understand the appeal of any of that.
No, I mean, I don't either. And the only reason that I write that stuff down is because it does kind of come under our purview,
Oh,
as
absolutely.
it were. But yeah, yeah, and there was another one this week too that was interesting for another reason. It really reminded me of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. And
Oh,
that's not just because it was England,
yeah.
but you had these two pedophiles who were married, and the wife was trying to help the husband rape a child.
Jesus.
And these were two, I think you give them time, they probably would have killed somebody if they weren't caught.
Yeah, that's how that was definitely the case with uh, Myra and
Oh, yeah.
what's his name?
Ian.
Ian
Yeah.
and also Fred and Rose West.
Oh, yeah. I always
Eh,
forget about them, but yeah, them too. Absolutely. But yeah, and the other stuff going on, of course, Minneapolis burning. Just sad. I mean, I'm sure I've said it before. My relatives in Minnesota. I love that state. I do.
I did some work there many years ago. Um,
Oh yeah.
Spent a lot of weeks there. Um,
Not a place I would want to live at just because of the weather, but I mean, I love the people in the state and I love visiting.
what was interesting is we stayed at the hotel that later was used for the parking garage scene in Fargo.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
definitely recognize that place. Um,
um, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's actually where my family on that side is from, is Moorhead, Minnesota, right across the Red River from Fargo. So, but yeah, and that whole George Floyd case, man.
that is bad news.
And I was trying to understand that. I was trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I just don't see a reason you would ever put a knee on a suspect's neck when
No,
he's down.
no.
And I could understand the back in some cases, but the neck,
Was
I
he?
just don't
Was
get
he?
it.
Yeah, haven't even been able to bring myself to watch it.
And he was cuffed, he was restrained, he was on the ground, and they still had the knee on him. But
You know, the thing that has been bugging me for a long time, for years, in fact, is this attitude among law enforcement that they have to protect, you know, the department from scandal. And it's like bullshit. You do
mhm,
what's right, and that's how you
yeah,
get trust, not from
I
not from
absolutely
covering
agree.
shit up
Uh,
and sweeping it under the rug.
I'm 1000% with you on that. Hopefully, a wider use of body cameras will,
Yeah.
encourage that. But I think other things that can help are like citizen review boards. To work with them and just more community policing too. But yeah, that whole thing. I thought Fox News actually did an excellent job with how they were covering the riot there. They took a big section out of the article and they were quoting a reporter who was on the ground from a local Twin Cities outlet who was talking to these guys that were there with guns, but they were protecting the stores.
Okay.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
they said we don't agree with this looting, but we do agree with the protests.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're really hurting their own community by stealing and burning the local businesses, the small, you know, Target's a Minneapolis company for
yeah.
crying out loud.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I saw this. This literally happened in my backyard in Ferguson. I mean, I
Yeah.
am not far from there at all in St. Louis. I actually had a friend the night of the Ferguson riots who was a manager at a local business down there. He's also ex military. He saw rioters coming near a store near his house, took his sidearm outside, fired a warning shot in the air, and it dispersed them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. They do that really well.
yeah. I mean, it's the good guys with guns, but it also reminded me of what Mr. Rogers said before. When things get dark, look for the people who are trying to help.
Yeah.
And that it gives you a little bit of hope when you see that, I think.
You know, taking a flat screen TV is not helping your cause. If
Yeah.
assuming your cause is justice for this murdered man, you know, stealing a flat screen TV is just not, you know, furthering that agenda. It's just
Well,
it's just
yeah.
fucking stealing. It's all it
Oh,
is.
I couldn't agree more. And I really couldn't. But the question that I have with that, and I'm sure this will come out in time, how many of those people looting were actually from the area? When that happened in Ferguson, a lot of them who were arrested for that were from out of town.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Um, I mean, there's no way to
There
prevent that,
there
I guess.
there
But
does seem to be a certain element that loves to dive in and cause mayhem when these things happen.
yeah, the people who just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, and he had a couple of these that were kind of more funny. The Muskogee County, Georgia DA, he filmed an illegal rap video with two guys who were doing donuts
I,
in a county parking lot, and they were arrested. So,
I saw that, and uh, frankly, I wasn't really clear what the big deal was.
no, it really wasn't.
Just
I,
they burned rubber in a parking lot, and
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what's the big deal? I think that they were trying to say something about defacing or destroying government property, but it's like, so what? It wasn't that bad.
No,
But
no. I think somebody's being kind of petty and trying to undermine maybe a opposing candidate, maybe.
it could be. I'm not sure. But oh yeah, and then you had the woman who was arrested for battering her boyfriend. Her excuse? She said he quote liked it rough.
Yeah, does
Um,
that work when a guy says it?
nope.
Nope.
Equal protection, people. Equal protection. Cuts both ways.
Yeah, if you are, opposed to domestic violence, you got to be opposed to it going both directions because it does.
I
E
wonder how much of that's unreported when it happens against men.
Most of it. I think I've seen numbers in the 80 to 90% of it is unreported.
Wow, man. But oh yeah, he had a another interesting item. This one came out of St. Paul, and the it actually involves the Church of Scientology, but not in the way you would think. There was a guy who was brought up on charges for shooting a mugger in a parking garage. And it
Okay.
turned out he was a Church of Scientology employee, but they just dropped the charges against him. So
What?
it sounded
Oh,
like pretty clear cut self defense to
okay.
me with what happened. But
So the Scientology employee was the mugger?
oh, he was the guy who shot the mugger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, oh, and then you had remember the fire, the arson at the Kyoto Anime Studio last summer?
Yes,
We talked about it on this segment of the show, I think.
I think we
They
did.
finally made an arrest with that.
Really?
Yep, this past week. Oh, and then the last rather funny headline. This one out of the Ukraine. A woman was caught on tape taking her knickers, was the son's verbiage for that, taking her knickers off and using them as a face mask. After the person at the post office said, I'm not serving you without a mask. So, A for effort on that one, I
Oh,
guess.
yeah. And I mean, come on. You
Yeah.
know what's crazy is that it it it's this stu- s- mindset that you see all the time. It's nothing new, but
Mm,
these petty rules and petty rule enforcers that are more. I mean, it's just fucking TSA bullshit all over again, right?
yeah.
Take your shoes off. Why? Well, one time 20 years ago, some guy, you know,
Mm,
you know, cover your face. Well, covering your face with most things is no better than not having a cover at all.
yeah, I mean, it really doesn't do a lot. Uh, Personally, I think a lot of that is tied to property rights, too, once you get down to it. If you're talking about a private business that wants to mandate that, yeah, they should have every right to.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying,
Mm,
if you're gonna say you need to be protected, then make it not just some, you know, piece of satin that you
mm,
pull off your ass, literally, because it
yeah,
because it because it's fabric and it's over your face.
yeah, probably won't do a whole lot. But
Uh,
yeah, that was at a post office, too.
I have
So
I have a real problem with stupid rules.
yeah, heard that. But yeah, definitely. That was all I had for the news
Okay,
this week.
another very strange case this week.
Bizarre, most definitely. And before we get into this one,
Yeah.
we need to make it clear to people this, although the first incident happened in 1982, is still an active investigation with the NYPD's Arson and Explosives Squad, the ATF in New York City, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives now, ATFE, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service.
Oh yeah.
So, what that means is they are holding quite a bit of info back.
Right.
Uh, and, you can't blame them on that. They have to have it as leverage if they ever do pull somebody in.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. You can't, you know, you can't be disclosing everything
yeah, oh, absolutely.
when it's considered an open case. And it's what, 38 years?
Yeah, yeah, till the first one. But that also means that a lot of what we had to do with the sources with this was cobble it together. And what I have are about 25 different news articles is what I use
Wow.
to get all this info. Um, and all of them share, different pieces of what's happening. But I'll do my best to present it.
Cool.
Um,
Be sure and let me know what images you want to see
sure.
as we're
Uh,
going along, if it's
you
not real
know,
clear.
let's do that. Let's start with the image of the house in Brooklyn. I believe it has a black timestamp and date stamp under it.
Ooh.
And to start people off, to get you in the headspace, May 7th, 1982, it's the Friday before Mother's Day of that year. And we're in a modest, I guess you could say, middle class neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, one of the 5 boroughs. We're at the home of 54-year-old Joanne Kipp and her husband Howard. They have 2 children, one named Doreen, who lives in Connecticut, and another named Craig, who's 28 at the time and lives literally 1,000 feet from them, just around the corner in an apartment.
Okay.
Yep, that is their house. It's around 4 o'clock, and the Kipps, Joanne and Howard, have plans to go off to their vacation home in Lake Hayward, Connecticut that day. But it's around 4 o'clock, so Joan is on her way home from her job at a local junior high school as a guidance counselor. And her husband, Howard, he's out in the garage fiddling around with something around the house. And Joanne, she gets home, she takes her mail in. Everything looks fine, and she puts it on the table. And there's a package at the top. It's about roughly 6 by 9 inches,
Okay.
and nothing looks amiss with it. So she takes a knife and she opens it just like any other package. And it's a cookbook, right? I
Okay.
think we have a picture actually of the book that it
I
is too.
do have a picture.
Um, it was a cookbook ordered from Sears and Roebuck. She didn't order it, but she thought it might have been a gift for Mother's Day. Not an unreasonable assumption,
Right.
considering the date and everything. So she sits down, opens it. Howard, meanwhile, is at the kitchen window on the side of the house, and he hears a loud explosion. He runs inside. There are 2 bullets rather, in his wife's abdomen,
Whoa.
and one lodged in the kitchen wall. So what does he do? He's freaking out at the time, of course, just like any nervous husband would after seeing that. He takes her to the couch, lays her down, and calls 911 to get an ambulance there.
Did
And
he, was
meanwhile,
it obvious that it came from the cookbook? From,
he, I'm sure he wasn't sure at the time.
okay.
I mean, when your adrenaline's still running high,
Right.
I think it would be, reasonable to be in a little bit of shock with that. But um, he has her on the couch in there, and she is just laying there. She's bleeding out, literally in front of him. And she looks at him and she says some pretty cryptic words. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page with that quote there. Wrote it down here. She says, oh crap, me and my notes. She says, quote, "Look what they did to me." And she goes on and says, "There may be others."
What? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, see, I could take that first one as just, not necessarily meaning that she knew who it was, but just as like, um, hey, look what they did to me. But
Mm-hmm.
then when that second sentence, that's
Mm-hmm.
weird.
That may say something, and it's going to go to a couple of the theories as to this bomber the
Yeah.
more that we get into it. But the ambulance gets there and they take her to the local Lutheran hospital. She dies 3 hours later on the operating room table with one of the rounds in the shrapnel that got near enough to her heart
Mm.
that it killed her. But yeah, I mean the police they start investigating
Yeah, I mean,
this.
God, I'm still chewing on her words. It sounds like she had some kind of an inkling of who was behind it, doesn't it?
It really does, and it could go a couple of different ways to a couple different theories, though, which we'll get to.
Okay.
But the police, they get there. The NYPD bomb squad gets there to investigate this. They find the device is was hollowed out inside this cookbook,
Okay.
and what it consisted of, which we have some of the parts here, were two 6-volt D batteries, wires over a metal plate that were looped into light bulb filaments. And these light bulb filaments were each looped into three separate steel barrels that were made from brake lines, which we have pictures of too.
Yeah.
And the reason that I fished those out, honestly, when I first read the brake line thing, it made me think of rubber, of like a
No,
rubber
no, no.
hose.
There's too much pressure.
Hmm.
Right. They
Well,
couldn't be rubber,
yeah, I mean that was the
but they are
press's
flexible.
bad writing with it, but um, yeah,
Brake lines are a high pressure tube
hmm
with pressure couplings on each end, but they're flexible.
yeah, yeah, and the barrels. These things served as the barrels for the 322 rounds that were in them. Three
That's
separate barrels,
interesting.
322 rounds, and each of these had the light bulb filaments hooked in directly to the gunpowder beneath them. And
Okay.
the powder, they found the powder with these was double the usual amount of gunpowder in a 22 round,
Ah,
which there's a couple reasons I was trying to wrap my head around for that, which we can get to in a little bit here. But
I have an
yeah, so
idea.
basically, what happens with that is she opens the book, completes the electrical circuit, and boom, all three of them fire.
Mm-hmm.
But now the guys that examined this, said they were surprised that all three of them fired. So
Why?
there must have been. So they didn't elaborate on
Okay.
that with what I could find. But there must have been some flaw about it. Or maybe it's just because they hadn't seen a bomb like this. And that's because this isn't actually a bomb. It's a zip
Ah,
gun. It's a crude gun. It's not something like a pipe bomb.
it's not an explosive device that shoots, in all directions, shrapnel.
Right. Right. And that's another thing that's very, very curious about this. Usually, when you see bombs, they are meant for, like you said, maximum destruction,
Yeah.
not the sort of surgical precision.
Well,
That,
Unabomber's, a lot of his were small personal explosive devices, right?
yeah, but small enough to where they would just kill one person. I don't.
I think so. I think he's because he would send bombs to individuals that and
Mhm.
would ended up killing just the targeted person
Huh,
in some.
interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know that part about him. But yeah, there's quite a degree of surgical precision with this anyway. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But here's the thing, though. Even with, well, I was gonna say, you would, you take a risk of missing a person completely this way, but if you take into consideration the expected um, way the victim would approach the bomb, in this case the cookbook, they would turn it
hmm
upside right,
yeah,
and open the cover. So you have a pretty good idea how the victim is going to be oriented towards the device.
hmm yeah. And that's the vital thing there too. It wasn't just opening the package that caused the explosion. It was opening the book. Um,
Right.
but this happened, and so the police, the investigators, they brought in, of course, the postal inspectors with this, um, and later on the ATF as well. They're looking at this as just an isolated incident for the time being, right?
Yeah, well, why would you think anything else, especially if there was no
hmm
note?
There was
Oh, there
actually.
was.
And this leads into one of the first suspects that they had for Jones' murder. They found a note written on the cover, or the inside cover rather, of the cookbook. And it said, Joan, you're dead. Next, Howard, next Craig. And it had her name crossed off. And from there, basically, they took it, and it was all written. This is interesting because we've talked about handwriting analysis before on here.
Yeah,
I never knew until studying this because it's not a science once you get down to it, it's art. You're literally comparing pictures, right?
true, true. And looking for uh, patterns. It's a lot of pattern recognition. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, there's a lot of different, very subjective interpretations of things,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
slangs that you can't just measure that shit. It's very much subjective.
oh, absolutely. But yeah, that
Like,
note is
but
gonna.
like a surprising amount of forensic evidence is subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Oh yeah,
I mean, we kind of have this idea from TV shows and shit that um,
that it's all
forensics,
hard
it's all
science.
hard science, and it really isn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, once you get down to it, though, I think there might be a bit harder of a base for something like, let's say, ballistics versus
Yes.
handwriting analysis. But yeah, that note, they actually started focusing on the father, on Howard and on Craig as their
Wow.
first suspects with this, which is natural when you have this sort of murder. And Howard was very cooperative with them. He gave them the keys to his marine consulting company in Red Hook that he owned.
Yeah.
And he also even gave them his wife's diary. The guy was very open about it, about everything with that. But what really made that all turn was on the day of Joan's funeral, beforehand, the police drag in Doreen, and subject her for upwards of 3 hours of questioning on the
Really.
day of her mom's funeral, which just it made no sense to me as a tactic.
This
You
is
know,
this is the image of Doreen from that's taken from a
the
different
Brooklyn
image.
Spectator, I believe, which is I
This
don't know if they're still around or not. That was a third-party source I got it from, but I think it was labeled as from the Spectator. Yeah, that is Doreen. Um, and she said her quote was, "I felt harassed." And after all of that, they ended up finding legal counsel, and the legal counsel was helping keep the cops away. So,
That's what a good lawyer does. By the way,
yeah,
police come to ask you questions. You give them one word answer.
lawyer.
Lawyer.
Yep. And you know, I think that honest cops will understand that. They will understand, you know, your legal rights and they'll respect them.
Yeah,
Um, but I couldn't get over that. How incompetent do you have to do that? Because first of all, they're going to be uber emotional anyway when you drag them in the day of the funeral. But they did that and they pivoted a little bit after this when they couldn't dig up anything on Howard, and they went to the son Craig. And they had this handwriting analysis, again, block letters. They compared it to Craig's, and you had one analyst who said that it's a match. But come to find out in this pseudoscience of handwriting analysis, it's very hard, if not impossible, to match block letters to an individual conclusively by their
absolutely.
standards. And they ended up finding about 4 other experts. This was the state, not the defense, found 4 other handwriting experts that said, no, this isn't his handwriting. So,
Wow.
yeah. And in this, the guy who initially said it, the expert who initially said it, was employed by the Postal Service, apparently.
I see.
Um, and they also had a little bit of evidence with a explosives canine handler who brought in a German Shepherd that apparently alerted on one of Craig's socks, alerted on the scent there, and alerted on the same scent with a mechanism from inside the bomb. And the way that they actually did this,
Mm,
they set out an array of them, is what they said. An array of these, you know, that looked the same, apparently. Um, but the problem there was a lawyer by the name of Abercrombie who was the former prosecutor with it.
oh yeah, I used to shop at his store.
But this guy, he said that the main problem there wasn't that the evidence was uncredible, which it was. It's that the experts were not credible.
Ah, well that
Neither
kind of
this trainer
yeah,
was credible, and neither was the handwriting guy.
yeah.
So, what do? They dropped the murder charge that they had, and they dropped the federal mail tampering charge that they had him on. They actually released him on $750,000 bail, was what they set it at
Holy shit.
before they dropped those charges. So, yeah, I mean, the whole thing pretty much dead end from there. But there was another suspect that came up in roughly 1983. And this was a guy by the name of Stephen Wavra, who was about, let's see, he was born in 1954, so about 29 at the time. He was a former student at the junior high where Joan Kipp was a guidance counselor. And he said that he didn't have anything against her personally, but you look at his history, it's Yeah, it's out there. He was held back for 2 years at that junior high. He got out. He spent about a year in the Air Force from 1972 to 1973.
Okay.
I wasn't able to find out what capacity he served in the military, what he actually did in the Air Force, but
What,
he
1 year
was
though?
1 year, 1972 to 73, was
So they kicked him out.
uh, essentially. They found out with with a psychiatric examination that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia.
Ah,
But this guy, he gets a little bit better as a suspect for my mind in looking at this. He also had a history of getting into a fight with an MP while he was in the Air Force
okay.
and making bomb threats to post offices.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
but
there's a connection.
it gets even better with this. The whole way that they even got a bead on this guy in 1983, they were investigating him for unrelated stuff. They went into his apartment, I would assume for a search. They found bomb making materials on his stove. And apparently, they found a device that was similar to the cookbook.
Okay, so
Yeah.
one of the problems that I have with the way the law enforcement and the press defines bomb making materials is you could go into any guy's garage who knows how to make shit and fix shit, and you can call
Hmm.
it bomb making materials.
I mean, this is true, but they also found a device that was similar to the book.
Okay, if you find something that's constructed or partially constructed, that's a different
Hmm.
story.
Yeah.
But
Well, and this was.
every guy in my family has a garage full of wires and gasoline and fertilizer and batteries and nails, you know,
Hmm. Oh, sure. Yeah,
and
definitely.
pipes of different kinds. Oh my God, it's bomb making materials. Well, no, that's just household maintenance shit.
Well, oh yeah, I mean, most definitely. But yeah, one of the other charges that they said was on his rap sheet
Yeah.
was possession of noxious chemicals. I couldn't find any clarification on that either,
Hmm.
what that even means. But that was on there, and he spent, a lot of time in prison throughout this. He was actually in prison when Kip died. But they had a theory with this that he mailed the parts to his roommate and his roommate constructed it. I don't know if that pans out, but and it could be. But the
Yeah.
saga of Stephen Wavra doesn't end there. Come 1995,
Okay.
when we get into the middle of when these other bombings are happening, that which we'll talk about, they found him in a Brooklyn library with another bomb that was similar to the books, but was filled with exacto blades as shrapnel.
Okay, they caught him in a library with a device.
With one, I'm not sure if it was weaponized yet, if it was ready to, be used,
Yeah.
but they caught him with, again, something similar.
Whoa.
Yeah. And
That's
the
yeah,
last,
that kind of makes you think he might be the guy, right?
yeah, I mean, it really does. But the last mention that I saw of this guy in the press was in 2002 when the New York Daily News caught up with him for an interview. And he was in prison, a federal prison in Beaumont, Texas, for possession of 22 shells by a felon.
Oh,
They gave him 90 months for that.
really?
It seemed like quite a bit for just
For just
22 shells.
ammunition?
Yeah. But
90 months.
yeah, he also said
That's
he was going to write his own history of this case. So, but there's some more weird tie-ins with him with these other bombings too. But let's just keep him in mind and sort of table him a little bit as a suspect for now. Skip ahead from 1982 all the way to 1993. This was when our next package was delivered to retired New York City sanitation man Anthony Lenza at his home in Staten Island. And it was actually picked up by his relatives and brought to their vacation house in the Poconos, Pennsylvania, northeastern PA on the New York border. And they brought this one in, which was shaped like a coin case, a blue velvet coin case, which I think we have a picture of
we
too, just
do. Boop.
if people want to see that. Um, and they brought this one in and opened it. It explodes again with three 22 shells. One of them hits Anthony Lenza. One of them hits his boy, who is there, and one of them hits his 11-year-old granddaughter,
Oh,
Liza. Now, luckily, while all three of them were injured, none of them died. So,
oh,
I mean,
that's good.
that's great. But they were, looking at that, and yeah, that happened too. And again, with this one, is interesting because, like in the Kip case, there were two barrels pointed in one direction and the other barrel pointed in the other direction, exact opposite. And again, all of them were at
So
about the
forward and one opposite.
yes.
Okay.
And one officer, one investigator, said it's almost like he was trying to take out somebody on the opposite side of the room with that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, two people with one. But yeah, and they were at about the angle, like in the Kip case, where they would have hit um, vital organs in the chest,
Yeah.
vital organs or higher. So, yeah, you had that one. And the next one
So that was
wasn't,
10 years after the first one, right?
yes, 10
That's a
years.
long cooling off period.
It is. And
I mean,
it
we
brings,
see it from time to time, but not frequently.
no, we really don't. And between these two, the investigators said that they were pretty certain this was the same guy. And I would be inclined to believe them considering the amount of detail that they withheld from the
Right.
press.
Right.
Um, but there is this idea out there that, and this goes back to what Howard said in 1982 in an interview with the Brooklyn Spectator, where he said that he thought it was a joke gone bad by one of her students at that school.
Hmm.
Basically, maybe one that was suspended or what have you. That could fit the bill for Mr. Wavra if you look at it. If
Yeah.
it was a joke gone bad, and it, as
That's
partial evidence for that, what he said was that his wife's cryptic words
yeah.
meant that she wanted him to call the principal at the school to warn other teachers.
Hmm.
That's what he thought that meant. Um,
Yeah. Generally speaking, pranks involving bullets are not really pranks.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree. A prank gone horribly wrong. Um, which, well, we'll get to that other theory here after we
I
talk
mean,
about a
I
couple
mean, if
more
you're
of these.
gonna do a prank, you have a maybe a tiny amount of black powder that just goes poof, or maybe a little tiny bang. And it's shock. Ha 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 ha.
Not a live
Surprise.
round in it.
Not a live
Right.
round.
Yeah.
Not a
Yeah.
barrel. Jesus.
Yeah. But if you look at that, there is this idea that maybe it was just one person in 1982,
Yeah.
and maybe it was a copycat in 1993. That's one theory.
Yeah,
Um,
but again, they would know there would be, I would suspect, key differences in the device construction that the police would be able to
mhm.
say yay or nay. I mean, you could definitely go, oh, look, we've got this and this and this that are identical, so this is clearly the same guy.
Yeah, I mean I agree. When you look at it, and like I said, the amount of detail that's being withheld with that,
Hmm.
you have to just trust the people who are examining this and have no reason to lie about it,
Right.
you know. But yeah, you had the Lenza package, which was mailed from Brooklyn. The first one was mailed from, I believe, Staten Island
Okay.
on the return addresses. But skip ahead about a year. April 5th, 1994. 75-year-old Brooklynite Alice Caswell receives a package. And this one, again, it's a commemorative coin blue velvet case. It's addressed to her brother by the name of Richard McGarrell, who was a retired customs officer at the Newark airport. But he hadn't lived with her for about 15 years, before this was
Okay.
sent. She opens it, and two 22 shells hit her in the abdomen. And she luckily made her way to a neighbor's house as she was bleeding out, and she survived too.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 75 and she survived, which is just excellent. But that really stood out to me too. With 15 years, and they didn't know that guy was there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Somebody had some
maybe,
old information, right?
yeah, something. But this also kind of starts to show the pattern that we're seeing with that. All three of the addressees are civil servants, right? Some sort of position with
Okay.
it. Um, but we skip ahead again to the next attack. June 27th, 1995. 18-year-old Stephanie Gaffney, who lives in Queens at her grandparents' house, their grandparents' name is Gilmore. She receives a package that the police were rather mum on what exactly this package was,
Hmm.
but she said it was a book. I'm not sure why they would withhold that particular bit of information, especially if Miss Gaffney had already said that in a different account. But she said, the package looked legitimate, and it was addressed to, again, her grandfather. And this one was interesting too because it actually said Gilmore or occupant on it.
Oh, interesting.
It kind of makes you wonder if maybe he didn't learn from the attack on Alice Caswell. That Mr. McGarrell was no longer living there.
Hmm.
But it's addressed to Gilmore or occupant, which she assumes is her grandfather, who is a retired NYPD officer. And her uncle, as well, was a narcotics officer who was responsible for bringing down a Dominican drug gang in the city. But she opened it, and again, um, you had shrapnel that luckily none of them penetrated her body. She was about 8 months pregnant when this happened, too.
Whoa.
Miss Gaffney. She just suffered burns from it when it happened, but they took her to the hospital right away and induced labor because they were worried about the kid.
Right.
And luckily, she had a healthy baby girl. So, I mean, her and her little girl were fine.
So
And
what was the composition of the device was different then. It
um,
sounds like.
well, you know, I think this one might be more how she was holding it when
Okay.
it opened. Um, she said that she had it at a pretty acute angle from her
Okay.
when it opened. So
Ah.
that could be why she was just burned from it. Um, and yeah, that was another very, very bizarre attack. And skip ahead again about 1 year to June 20th, 1996. There's a retired real estate agent by the name of Richard Basile who received a package that looked like a videotape, which it was addressed to his wife, who also worked in the real estate office with him.
Okay.
I actually asked a agent that I know who's been in the game for a while because all these packages have been basically tailored to the individual that they thought was receiving it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it wouldn't have been out of line for a real estate agent to receive a videotape that's usually like a walkthrough of the building or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but
It's all
this
online
one,
now, but back in the
yeah,
day, you had to have physical media.
yeah, and 96 is basically pre internet anyway, in the way that we're talking about it. But
Yeah.
this videotape, he cut his wife's package open, the tape explodes in their kitchen. Neither of them were injured, though. It just
Oh.
blew out their window.
Whoa.
So,
Talk
this one,
talk about dodging a bullet.
yeah, literally dodging at least probably two of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just blew out the window. This one was interesting, though. I couldn't find any evidence that his wife was somehow in civil service or the military,
Mm.
the way all the others have been.
Okay.
But interestingly, on this package, our guy was getting a little bit more bold because guess what he put as the return address? March of Dimes of Greater New York.
What?
Yeah, yeah. Um, the police said it wasn't their official label on it, but he apparently used their name and address.
Hmm.
So that after that attack, they pretty much just fizzled out.
Really?
There
They just.
hasn't been another one. It just stopped.
So, the guy that was our early prime suspect.
Stephen Wavra.
Yeah. So, is he still alive? Was he in prison? Could he have was he free to do all of them? And did he ever get incarcerated or hospitalized or dead or anything like that after
My
that last one?
understanding, he's still alive.
Okay.
He would be about, well, when did I say he was born? He'd be about, what, early 60s, roughly,
Okay.
right now. But he wasn't out of prison that first time until 2005. But there are some other kind of fishy connections here. And maybe they're just sort of general, maybe they don't mean anything. But police who thought he was a good suspect found records of either him or his roommate in the computer of local pharmacies next to each of the victims' places of residence or very
What?
near. I don't know how they thought to check that,
Right.
but they found these
Yeah. Why?
records.
Why pharmacies of all things?
it makes me wonder. They didn't even give a name of the roommate in any of the articles that I read, but it
Okay.
makes me wonder if he didn't have a history of drug abuse. Maybe he was doctor and pharmacy shopping,
Hmm.
and that was how they thought to do that. But with the connections there with Wavra, they said that it always popped up at a pharmacy or somehow in the victim's neighborhood, but they could never pin down why. It was just always there, and it bred more questions than answers once you get down to it.
Yeah, that is very curious.
Yeah, why they would be in all of those.
Yeah. But, you know, um, you can you can make a case based on probabilities like that. Like it's like this is completely outside of random.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look at all of the amount of pharmacies in the 5 boroughs of New York City, on
hmm
top of it,
right.
but yeah, they could never figure out a connecting thread there. But there was the other big theory that one camp of the cops was looking at is interesting because you had these different investigative camps that cropped up among these different agencies and people looking at it. You had the cops that still liked the Kips for it, even with these other bombings.
Really.
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
and then you had,
I swear to God, some detectives, man, they're like a dog with a bone.
yeah, they kind of get myopic about it,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, they do get myopic, but for my money, there's really nothing that ties the Kips to any of this once you look at it. I mean, and with Craig, they were trying to make the argument that because Howard's business involved installing various electrical devices on ships' boilers, that Craig somehow knew how to build those bombs from that.
What?
Yeah,
Oh, come on.
that doesn't follow to me at
No.
all. And in fact, Howard said that to them. He said, "This kid hasn't even taken physics, and you expect him to build a sophisticated mail bomb."
Right.
And in fact, one of the postal inspectors, he had an interesting quote where he said, "There are no unsophisticated mail bombs. You have to have a good degree of sophistication to build one. Period,"
Yeah.
is what he said.
I mean, you don't necessarily acquire that in school, but you've got to have some hands-on, you know, uh,
Yeah.
understanding of the forces involved and the mechanics involved and the engineering involved.
Oh, definitely. And I think that this guy, it's pretty fair to say, had a knowledge and an understanding of guns and how they work too.
Yeah,
He'd have to.
yeah,
But yeah, you had these two different camps. You had the one who liked the Kips, and then you had the ones who were looking really close at Wavra and liked him for it.
yeah.
And it sort of went on from there, and they can never get enough evidence for anybody,
Wow.
any of them. Although there was one cop who said in 2010 that we might just be one interview away from solving this. Um, I don't know exactly how, but
Well, I mean, that's always the case, isn't it?
yeah, and they were being kind of weird with how they were dropping some of the information. That same year, there was a cop who said, and I quote, "We have a new development." And the only elaboration that he gave on that, "This is an ongoing investigation." He didn't say anything else.
Hmm.
It seemed very weird to me that you would drop just that bit of information without saying more.
Well, it's probably a good thing you didn't say more because it sounds like it didn't pan out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely didn't, but yeah. I mean, for my money, again, I think Wavra is one who probably could be looked at more. And is definitely a better suspect than the Kips were.
Yeah.
So it sounded to me like you had some people who were trying to railroad that family. And it turned out with that, Howard remarried and moved to Massachusetts. Not sure when he died, but he probably, I mean, it was 2002 and he was 77, I think,
Mm,
when they were talking to him. And Stephen Kipp, he was going to move with his wife Susan out to San Diego before his mom was murdered. And it turned out they moved to Connecticut. And he had a job at a computer place as a foreman doing something.
okay.
And he lost that. And when they caught up with him in 2002, he was just a cashier at a 7-Eleven. So it sounded like it kind of destroyed that poor kid.
Yeah. I've said it before in this show. Murder kills families.
Yeah, it really does. It's just very sad.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of the case that they were trying to build there. The cops first hypothesized that Howard fired Stephen from his job, and from there they tried to basically spin this narrative that Craig rather he fired Craig from his job. Sorry, getting too confused there for a second.
Yeah.
That Howard fired Craig, which Howard said was unequivocally wrong, and that from there the hate for his parents just festered and festered. And Howard again said that's unequivocally crap, was his word. He said that the reason that Craig uh, lost his job with the Marine Company is that he just wasn't good at it. And, and they all
Right.
felt that it was good for him to move on. He wasn't fired, he quit.
Okay. He
So,
quit before he was fired,
yeah, probably.
probably. So if he was mad at anybody, he'd be mad at the company,
Yeah, most likely. And
not his
family
mom.
businesses can get weird. I take that from me. I work
Oh
in
yeah.
one, but um, yet from what it sounded like, it was just a wholly manufactured bullshit, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's still, as far as I can tell, there is still $100,000 reward for information on this too. If anybody hears this and knows anything,
Yeah.
if I can
If
find
you know
the
anything, get in touch with us.
well, if I can find it, I haven't been able to yet, but if I can find a contact with the feds or with the NYPD for tips with that, and
Yeah.
somebody is listening to this who knows something, I'll post it on our Facebook page. So I was looking for that and I didn't see anything, but it's weird, man. One of the
Yeah.
weirdest cases in New York history once you get
Very
down to
much.
it.
He doesn't actually qualify as a serial killer, does he? Because he only killed what, two people?
No, he only killed one.
Oh, he only killed one person, so definitely not a serial killer.
No,
But still, this is the kind of behavior that, as they say often with serial killers, they don't stop on their own.
no. And that gets to actually the last theory that may be worth looking at.
Okay.
You had some investigators who think that this might be extortion with the different people. And they base that on a lot of the victims, when they interviewed them, were the word they used was reticent. And
Oh,
one cop said that it was like they just wanted to be left alone and to just move on from it.
Oh, really?
That may just be how they reacted. I don't know.
Yeah, but everybody?
I mean, not necessarily all of them, but they said that there was more than a few who
Yeah,
were like that.
that seems odd. I mean, one maybe okay, because you never know how people will react. But you start getting a pattern of that. That is weird.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. And it could, in theory, cast new light on those cryptic words Joan told Howard as she bled out on her couch.
Oh,
So, what she said could mean a kid, a troubled kid.
yeah,
Maybe it means
maybe.
extortion. Now, the police did say they looked at organized crime in the Kip case,
Yeah,
but nothing came of it. But it doesn't have to be organized crime necessarily
no,
for extortion either.
no, could be individuals.
Yeah. And in which case, I think the extortion hypothesis might also explain why he waited 10 years from the first one. He got a little, he didn't want to kill her, he wanted to scare her.
Ah,
And once she died, he gets rattled and he sits on basically what he's doing until 93, when he can perfect it a little bit more to where he's not killing any of them.
hmm,
And in which case, maybe he stopped in 1996 because his job was done. It's
maybe.
one theory.
Maybe he
And
had
it,
enough money to go wherever he wanted to go.
that very well could be. And in which case, his task was done. He
Yeah,
didn't feel he had to do any more. Now, that, I mean, it all, that makes sense. I think it
it
might make
kind of
more
does.
sense than
Yeah.
some of the others. Either that one or I think Wavra might be good for it too,
I mean,
just
yeah,
from looking at it. But yeah, I mean the serial bomber who technically wasn't a serial bomber. Once you
yeah,
get down to it.
yeah. Right.
Zip gun's not a bomb, y'all. So it is kind of misleading. But yeah, those are just some of them that I found on the net. A lot of those were actually made in prisons, where zip guns can be very popular weapons along with shivs that they seize.
Gotcha.
But
So interesting. Using a zip gun um, wouldn't leave any traceable striations on the bullet, would it? Because
no,
there's no rifling.
nope, none at all. And it gets back to something interesting too. If you look for plans on the internet of how to build these things,
Yeah.
most of them that come back are actually for a 12 gauge shotgun shell. And
Wow.
yeah, and it makes you wonder, why wouldn't you use those if you were building a bomb?
You
You know
would
what I mean?
if you're building a bomb.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Um,
It's definitely not as surgical
you
as what this guy did.
right, but bombs really are. So shotgun materials are definitely more conducive to building a bomb because you have the powder and you have the shot pellets, right?
Yeah,
When you
exactly.
deconstruct it. Uh,
And now that
a
gets
22 is not good. I mean, it might be fine for a zip gun, but it's not good for a bomb.
no, not at all. And it got me to wonder, maybe he didn't use the shotgun shells because of the difference in powder between that and a 22. I mean, even with double the powder in there, which he did for every single round that
Yeah.
he packed, it's about 80 grains of
Hmm.
powder. Um, Even with double that, that's nowhere near the amount that's in a typical 12
Oh,
gauge.
no, 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 no. Yeah.
But
Well, uh, my theory on why he doubled the powder is because there wasn't rifling. In
yeah,
other,
that makes sense.
because you don't. So when a rifle round is fired, the primer is ignited, which ignites the powder, which pushes the bullet
Hmm.
out of the casing into the barrel, but it doesn't fit into the barrel, right?
Right.
And
Right, it
so
doesn't.
it builds up a lot of pressure to push it out, and that's what gets the velocity going once it exits the barrel. But when you're using fucking brake liner, it's not a
Hmm.
tight fit.
No,
And
not at
so,
all.
and so that's why you would need extra powder to push it out, because you
Hmm.
don't you don't build up any pressure.
And especially when you consider that there wasn't a primer with any of these, that he literally took the base off of each round
Yeah.
before he put it in, which
By
I
the
would,
way, I would have used a model rocket engine igniter.
yeah, interesting. You know, when I was looking at this, the plans that I saw for a 22 zip gun,
Yeah.
they said that a 5.8 millimeter drill bit will get you the perfect fit for it
Oh,
in, in the plans that I saw. But if he didn't do that, with the brake line, it's going to be open,
right.
like we said. I'm not sure what the circumference is on one of those. I
I
should have
I
looked that up.
I don't either. Um,
But for people who don't know, a primer on a bullet is on the shotgun shell right there. It's right in the middle. It's what is struck and it ignites the powder on the inside.
yeah, it's a chemical reaction from the pressure that causes the ignition of the
Hmm.
primer, and then the primer, when it fires up, it lights the powder.
Yep. But with this, like we said, with the construct of that bond, it was literally the electrical wire fed right into
Yep,
where the gunpowder is.
yep,
So you wouldn't need it. Or it would act as a primer, you could also say.
exactly.
Which, interestingly, that's also from my research, I found that's also how they would send off quite a few heavy artillery shells, is through an
Yes,
electric
yes,
primer.
right. Um, yeah, so some of the heavy artillery, the medium and light artillery will have fully contained shells, and they look like giant, rifle rounds.
Hmm.
But you get up bigger, where you just can't build a case big enough to hold all of that shit,
No,
and it would
no,
rupture
not at all.
anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And you were saying it's about 20 pounds of powder in one of
Right.
those
So
bags for a heavy round.
yeah, so the big guns on the old battleships, yeah, they were huge bags of gunpowder that so they would load the shell
Hmm.
into the breech, and then they would load 1 to 3 different bags of powder.
Jeez, that
Yeah,
is a lot of gunpowder.
there's a lot. Well, the shells weighed as much as a Volkswagen,
Yep,
and they could
yep.
shoot those over the horizon.
Wow.
So yeah,
But yeah, and you look at that, and like we were saying, for again people who don't know that much about ballistics, the gunpowder in a bullet is measured in grains. And grains, I had to look this up when I was doing mathematical conversions
yeah,
between the shotgun shell and the 22 shell.
yeah.
There are 7,000 grains in a pound.
Okay.
So in a 20-pound bag, you're looking at 140,000 grains of powder. And in the typical 22 shell, you're looking at 40 grains of powder.
Wow.
Yeah. And well, that is in a typical 22 long shell,
Right.
which I assume you use because those are more common than a 22 short.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, the longs and long rifles are easier to come by, generally speaking, but they're none of them. It's hard. It's not hard to get any of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, in
you
the
can go down to
commonality.
this just the sporting goods store and get it. It's not difficult.
Yeah.
And
And they
back in
wouldn't
the
ask a lot of
80s,
questions.
you could just go to the hardware store. A lot of them had it, you
Oh,
know.
sure. Well, and that's the same way with the 12 gauges, too.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of questions asked, like
Nope.
we were saying.
Nobody's gonna ask
But
a question.
yeah, and
Except
that is
maybe
a
what are you going
very,
after?
oh, yeah. Well, and that is very, very important when you're looking at building something that is a bomb or a zip gun bomb, is commonality, because the more common the stuff is, the less they're going to be able to trace the ingredients that are left.
But so here's the weird thing though, is you could just buy the components. You can buy a can of smokeless powder
Hmm.
and bullets of whatever caliber you want. Eh, not 22 though. I take that back. You probably cannot buy just 22 um, slugs because nobody reloads it because you can't.
Hmm. Yeah, it wouldn't totally be worth it. I
Well,
came
not only worth it,
across,
but you can't reuse the brass.
very true. Yeah, I came across quite a few forums about reloading a
Hmm.
lot of ammo when I was looking through this stuff.
I've done a little
But,
bit of it too, um,
mhm,
years ago. Uh,
interesting. I'm sure quite a few people here have too. They got so many hunters in this area.
yeah, if you're gonna shoot any quantity at all, you gotta reload.
Hmm. But yeah, I mean, I would assume even in New York City with their stricter gun laws, they wouldn't ask a lot of questions,
No,
even back then. But
no. The questions are asked about the weapons, not about the ammunition.
hmm, oh yeah,
You just
but
have to be of age. And back in, back in the 80s, that was, you know, I don't even know if there was an age restriction on ammo purchases.
probably not. And it just reminds me of like my dad telling me stories about back then when he could drink when he was 18 too.
Yeah.
But hey, man, it's just so. This case is just one of them that it's more questions the more you look at it than really anything.
Yeah, very much so. And the handmade nature of the devices make it so, if you're using common materials, how do you track that shit down?
Oh, exactly. And interesting with this, a lot of people have heard of the Anarchist Cookbook by William Powell that details a lot of these types of weapons and how to make them.
Yeah.
It's not out of the realm of possibility that whoever did this could have actually learned from Powell's primary sources, which
Oh.
he got from the U.S. Combat Bookshelf at the New York Public Library.
Uh, did they even go to see who checked those out?
I'm sure they probably didn't, but I mean, there's that, and then there's all these. That's one thing I needed to look at, whether some of these other field manuals on how to make this stuff were included in that U.S. Combat Bookshelf. I mean,
Yeah.
so much of that now, including the Anarchist Cookbook, you can find, just as a PDF
Right.
with a Google search. But yeah. Oh, and another thing that also kind might feed into the extortion idea. Joan was a officer on a community board in her area of Brooklyn, that was essentially a conglomeration of government entities, quasi-government entities, and like nonprofits. And she was actually running for the VP of that.
Hmm.
And she was slated, I mean, people thought she was going to win before all this happened. I mean, not saying that her character would make her amenable to that, because by all accounts, she was not that way. In fact, the principal who worked with her said she lived a very sheltered life, was her word, his
Okay.
word. Um, but, you know, when you're in that sort of area, there's always the possibility that there's a rival or that
Yeah.
somebody is looking to get dirt on you.
Right.
So, possibility, man. Extortion.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It makes sense of how it is a way that these people could be connected.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That they hadn't seen or what have you. But yeah, I mean, I think it's totally wrong how they treated the Kips there. And at the very least, Wavra was a better suspect than them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we got to do a better job of training up our investigators and detectives and prosecutors, and better job of incentivizing the right things with these people.
Yeah, and ways to make sure that these cognitive biases don't happen. So, you know, I'm not trying to, you know, Monday morning quarterback the hell out of that or anything. You know, hindsight is 2020, but I think it's not out of line to ask them to learn from these sorts of mistakes too.
Well, yeah, but then the problem is if they don't have the right attitude, they're going to say, "What mistake? I was right.
Hmm.
We just couldn't prove it."
Yeah, and even showing them all the evidence that says they weren't right, they'll still stick to it.
Exactly.
But yeah, that is
That
the
is it.
weirdest serial bombing case in U.S. history, I think, arguably.
Absolutely.
You know that
Not the
no,
most destructive by any means, not the
uh,
most terrorizing by any means, but definitely weirdest.
yeah, I mean, you're talking about somebody who didn't leave any sort of clue as to a demand beyond maybe that one note in the Joan Kipp cookbook.
Yeah.
You know, and
And
you usually got guys like the Unabomber who leave a full manifesto.
right, you just can't shut them up.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one thing that actually Stephen Kipp or Stephen Wavra did was write a manifesto. It was like 250 pages and rambling, but it had nothing to do with bombings.
Ah,
So could be connected, could not be connected.
we may never know.
Yep,
In fact,
might
I would
not.
bet that that's the likely case.
I would bet so as well. It is a fair assessment.
All right, then. Thank you, sir, once more for exhaustive research.
My pleasure.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.